In this episode, I'm going to tell you the number one way to deal with, quote unquote, the trust recession. Right? For those of you who are not familiar with the term, trust recession is the term that many people in the coaching industry are using that kind of summarizes the changes that we're seeing in the marketplace, right? When we start talking about slower sales cycles or buyers being more hesitant, inconsistent revenue, all of the things that we have seen change in the coaching industry over the last year or two, maybe even a little bit longer, lots of people have grouped them under the term trust recession, right? And so in this episode, we're going to talk about what the recession is, right? So that way, as you pivot, you know what mistakes to avoid so you don't end up rebuilding a business that doesn't serve you. Okay. So as I said, you've likely at least heard the term, right? People describe it in lots of different ways, but it is essentially exactly what I said. There are lots of changes specifically in buyer behavior where buyers are more hesitant, they're investigating more, they're buying slower. Some would even say that they're buying less. I disagree with that. I think there are lots of people who are still investing in coaching. I'm surrounded by people in my own mastermind and other, that are currently paying for programs. I have clients in my programs, right? So I think there are plenty of people who are buying, but how people are buying, right? The speed of which people are buying is definitely changing. And those changes have consequences to the business owner, right? And so lots of people have talked about this idea of a trust recession. And what I find interesting as I listen to people talk about, quote unquote, a trust recession, they often link the solution to something related to marketing, right? Well, you need to be able to push better content, or you need tighter messaging, or something that has nothing to do with trust. It's so interesting to me how people are, whether it might be AI or, you know, having an ecosystem. One of the main ones that I hear is around having an ecosystem of content, how, because buyers' behavior has changed, the path is less linear, right? It's less funnel like, right? Where you take them from step one, step two, step three, step four. And now they kind of zigzag throughout your content, throughout your brand. And so you really need an ecosystem, right? And it's not that any of those things are bad. It's not that doing any of those things might not help, but it will not actually solve a trust recession, right? If you focus on marketing, right, you will build a business that you do not want again, right? And again, I'm not telling you not to market. We all need to be marketing, okay? But if we are specifically trying to solve a trust recession problem, right? If we're specifically addressing buyer behavior, marketing is not the number one way that you solve that problem. It's so interesting to me how we often think marketing is the solution for everything. And in some ways, I get it. I do think that a lot of businesses would be better off if they had more traffic, i.e., marketing, right? If they had more leads, i.e., marketing, right? So I understand why some people focus so heavily on marketing because it's an easier problem to solve than the actual real problem that solves a trust recession, right? That's what I want you to be able to hear, right? If you focus on marketing, here's the analogy that I would give, right? This is the one we talk about in our camp all the time, where when you're pivoting, you're basically rebuilding your business, right? To whatever degree. Maybe you're starting all the way over with a new business, or whether you're just making, pivots within your existing business. But it follows a very similar path to building a building or some kind of structure, right? And a lot of times when we're rebuilding or building something, because we as entrepreneurs love to be busy, we love to be able to see the fruits of our labor. We don't like the parts that you can't see the fruits of, right? So imagine buying a house, or imagine building a house rather. Well, the most important parts of the house are the parts you can't see. It's the foundation. It's the blueprints that came in order to design the house. These are all things that you don't see, but those are the most important parts, right? And so if you use this analogy of building a house and replace it with building a brand like yours, right? The most powerful thing that you can do is the step before you try to actually build the visible part, right? The marketing is all the visible part. We love to be able to see the leads and people opening our emails and downloading our lead magnets. And we love that. I love that for us. Okay. It's just not the best place to start, right? If you know you're called to make a bigger impact, right? If you know that you're called, right, to change the world in some kind of way. Now, I know you might be tired and be like, listen, I wanted to change the world last week, but today, get somebody else to do it. Okay. Just hold on with me. Okay. If you know these things, right, then architecting the infrastructure of your impact is the key, right? And you do that by designing the same way an architect designs a structure, right? And when you do that, you end up building an impact brand, right? If you are an entrepreneur who is pivoting, you need to do it differently. Impact brands center impact, right? When I say impact, I'm essentially talking about your product, your program, your service, whatever it is that you're actually offering. That's what we mean when we talk about impact, right? You know who doesn't have a trust recession problem? Just take a guess. Not that they don't experience any changes in their sales cycle, because everybody experiences some changes, right? But there's some groups of people who are still making millions of dollars in spite of whatever quote unquote trust recession that we may be having, right? Those people are the ones that are not impacted in some great way, right? And that is because their impact, i.e., their product or service, the results that they're getting with their clients is clear and consistent, right? The fix to a trust recession is building an impact brand, right? An impact brand simply centers impact. Most of the coaches, consultants, experts that I serve, they already have impact, right? They already do good work with their clients. But what we're talking about with an impact brand is where you center impact. It is the base. It is the biggest part of the work that you do. Because here's what naturally happens when you're not building an impact brand, right? Let's just say you have an e-commerce brand, or you have a service-based business, or you have a coaching business, or whatever kind of business that you have, right? Clients and most of my peers, most of the people that I see, they are people of integrity, right? I don't know very many in our world, okay? And so because you're already a person of integrity, you just already kind of assume that you're making impact, right? Especially when you get clients who love you and you get testimonials and right. It's like we have plenty of reason to feel like, no, we are being impactful. And you are. But when you have not centered impact, what ends up happening inevitably over time is that the program that you are offering is not the focus. The marketing is the focus, the sales is the focus, the automation is the focus, hiring the team is the focus, some kind of legal problem is the focus. All of these things begin to take over to where eventually impact is not the center, and you can feel the effects of that. Right. But when you build an impact brand and you center impact, right, as compared to just including impact, what ends up happening is that the best way I can explain this to you, when you center impact, it means that your product, your program, your service gets consistent results. And when I say consistent results, I don't mean all your clients love you. Okay. I'm talking about this program promised you blank. Meaning, let's say I'm a health coach and I have a 12-week program, and it is designed to help you lose at least 50 pounds, at least 20 pounds, at least whatever the number is in that program, right? When we say centering impact, we mean, well, what percentage of people actually get that result? Well, 9 times out of 10, the promise that we're making from our program is so broad and so vague that we're like, well, technically, 80% of the people that went through this program, and it's like, are we being honest? Because you know what? You know how you can tell is how much you have to market. The more you have to market, the harder you have to market, not to be confused with having to market, period, because we all have to market, right? But the more you have to market and the less you retain your clients, the more you can begin to question, what percentage of my clients are actually getting the result that we promoted with this program, right? So if you want to build an impact brand, right? If you want to not feel the impact or the consequences of the trust recession, this is the 5 kind of high level elements of a impact brand. The first is design. This is by far the one that people miss the most. Again, imagine you were building a structure, a business, you were an architect. You would not start with walls and plumbing and flooring and electric and all. You would not start there. You would start as an architect drawing up blueprints, right? Making sure that what you want can actually happen and how it can happen. This is the number one place that people make the mistake. They have not designed anything. I can spend a whole episode just talking about this, but I'm just going to lay out the 5 pieces. Okay. So design is number 1. Number 2 is declare. This is where you are going off and validating your offer. You're actually putting it out into the world, right? Both the positioning of your brand, but also the positioning of the offer that you're selling. That's number 2. And then number 3 is deliver, right? This is where the program that you designed actually has proof. It actually gives consistent results. Notice the dramatic pause there. Okay. It's like, oh, I put 30 people through this program over the last quarter or the last 2 quarters, and 20 people out of the 30 got results. Okay, great. Is that where you want to be? No, it's not where we want to be. This is the place where we don't spend enough time, mostly because we're already experts, right? And because we're already experts, we're like, well, I can't be out of integrity if I'm already an expert. I'm not lying. And it's like, yes, this is also true. But if only 30%, 40%, 50%, whatever your numbers are, get the result that your program promises, that means we need to tighten our delivery. Because if we don't, guess what happens? We have to work harder in our marketing. Okay. So that's number 3. And then number 4 is what we call dollars, right? This is where we tighten up all the pieces that bring in money, right? Your marketing strategy, your sales strategy, right? Tightening up the funnels that you have, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Lastly, is not necessarily step 5, because this one is embedded throughout the entire process, but it is the 5th element, which is development. And development is all about you, right? You becoming the person that you need to be, right? Whether it be leading the team, whether it having the capacity to stick to one strategy. Again, development really goes into a lot of different things, but it focuses on you and not the business. When you have these 5 elements dialed in, honey, you are unstoppable. Unstoppable. So if you happen to be someone who is concerned, right, who is paying attention to the landscape that is changing within the coaching industry, guess what? Guess what? You need to have an impact brand, right? If this is something that you're interested in, you want to learn more about it, you already know you want to do it, you're somewhere in between, you should definitely check out Pivot School, because this is exactly what we do. We start with the design phase where we are helping you lay out all the pieces of your brand, right? Every single element of your brand, so you know exactly what fits together, what doesn't, and you have a solid, personalized pivot plan to operate from.